My mother-in-law sent me refrigerated gourmet chocolates for my birthday. The next day she called and asked, how were the chocolates? I smiled and said, my husband ate them all. There was a pause, her voice trembled. What? Are you serious? And then, my husband called me. The Boston summer was humid, and Amy Collins had her apartment air conditioner running at full blast while she worked. Her Macintosh screen displayed the website design for a new client. Amy was building a reputation as a freelance web designer. Honey, there's a message from my mother. Thomas called from the sofa in the living room. Amy involuntarily shrugged her shoulders. Communications from her mother-in-law Patricia often caused problems. What does she say? Amy asked without interrupting her work. Thomas looked at his cell phone and answered. She's asking if we'd like to have dinner at her place next Sunday. She wants to celebrate your birthday. Amy took a deep breath. Patricia Collins behaved politely on the surface, but there always seemed to be something hidden behind her words. After 3 years of marriage, Amy had never felt genuine warmth from her mother-in-law. I'll go if you want to, Amy said. Looking at her husband's face, she could see how truly pleased he was. Thomas was a financial analyst with sharp judgment at work, but when it came to family matters, he was strangely blind, especially regarding his mother. Wonderful. Mother has started to accept you recently, Thomas said with a smile. She even said the other day, Amy has become a good wife. Amy returned his smile, but inside she felt doubtful. It was unusual for Patricia to say anything nice about her. In fact, since their wedding day, Patricia seemed to treat Amy as the woman who stole my son. Is Vanessa coming too? Amy asked about her sister-in-law. Oh, of course. She's been living at Mom's house lately, Thomas answered casually. After graduating from college, Vanessa had held several jobs that didn't last long and eventually returned to her mother's home. Amy couldn't ignore the coldness in Vanessa's gaze toward her. Those eyes were clearly filled with jealousy. All right, Amy said with a sigh. Should we bring anything? No. Mom says she'll prepare everything. Oh, and she mentioned she's preparing a special present for you. Thomas's voice sounded pleased. Amy forced a smile. A special present from Patricia meant a sweater 3 sizes too small last Christmas. The Easter before that, it was a cake full of nuts that Amy was allergic to. They were all things Patricia could easily excuse with I didn't know. In the evening, as Amy was preparing dinner in the kitchen, Thomas came up behind and embraced her. What are you thinking about? He asked gently. Your mother, she answered honestly, and Thomas's expression clouded. Are we starting this again? Amy, Mom just wants to get along with you. Amy stopped herself from arguing back. This conversation had been repeated many times. Thomas never tried to see behind his mother's words and actions. For him, Patricia was the perfect mother. And if there were any problems, they must be on Amy's side. I'm sorry, Amy said. I'm just tired. Thomas kissed her to show forgiveness, but a small dissatisfaction remained in his eyes. During these 3 years, the tension in Amy and Thomas's relationship had gradually increased. At the beginning of their marriage, Thomas had acted protectively toward Amy, keeping distance from the excessive interference of his mother and sister. However, as time passed, he was gradually pulled back into the vortex of his original family. When the weekend came, Amy met with her friend Jessica at a cafe, while Thomas was out golfing with friends. You're going to your mother-in-law's house again? Jessica asked with surprise. Last time, didn't she say something like, there's too much salt in your cooking, I'm worried about Thomas's health? Yes, Amy smiled bitterly. But I understand that Thomas values his relationship with his mother. Family means everything to him. Aren't you his family? Jessica frowned. Thomas doesn't say anything when Patricia and Vanessa always look down on you. Amy stirred her coffee thoughtfully. He doesn't notice. In his eyes, his mother is perfect. Jessica took her friend's hand. Be careful. I don't think Patricia truly accepts you. Amy nodded. She felt the same way. During each visit, she sensed Patricia's subtle sarcasm and Vanessa's cold stares. Still, she loved Thomas and had to endure it for his sake. The day before her birthday, Thomas kissed Amy and promised, tomorrow will be a wonderful day. As Amy lay in bed, she hoped it would be true. Yet somewhere in her heart, she sensed that tomorrow's visit would create new tension. When she closed her eyes, Patricia's false smile and the true feelings hidden behind it appeared. The accumulation of small insults and intentional disregard over 3 years had created an indelible anxiety within Amy. Amy's birthday morning began with a clear blue sky. While preparing breakfast, the intercom rang. Delivery for you, refrigerated package. Amy went to the door and received a package from the delivery person. Looking at the sender's name, she saw Patricia Collins. She was a bit surprised by the unexpected gift. Thomas, something arrived from your mother. Thomas, coming out of the bathroom while drying his hair, looked at the package with interest. It must be a birthday present. Let's open it. Amy carefully unwrapped the package. Inside was an elegant black box with Chateau Chocolatier written in gold letters. It was the name of Boston's most luxurious chocolate shop. Wow, Mom's being generous. These chocolates cost over $100 a box, Thomas said, impressed. Inside the box, various shapes of chocolates were beautifully arranged, with a small card attached. Amy picked it up and read, "Specially selected just for you." The handwriting was Patricia's meticulous script. "See," Thomas said happily, "Mom has finally accepted you, sending such expensive chocolates." Amy smiled, but felt uneasy deep inside. She couldn't believe Patricia would suddenly change her attitude. However, seeing Thomas's happy face, she couldn't voice her doubts. "That's very thoughtful. I'll enjoy them later." All day, Amy immersed herself in her web design work. In the evening, Thomas came home early and stood in the kitchen to prepare a special birthday dinner. Amy sat on the sofa in the living room, relieving the day's fatigue. "Dinner is ready," Thomas called out. The meal proceeded in a pleasant atmosphere. Thomas opened wine and offered a toast to celebrate Amy's birthday. "Happy birthday, my love. I'll be with you forever." After the meal, while Thomas was cleaning up the kitchen, he found the chocolate box. "How about some dessert?" He opened the box and picked one up. "This looks delicious." Amy was tired. "I'm a bit full now. I'll have some tomorrow." "Just one won't hurt, right?" Thomas had already put the chocolate in his mouth. "Wow, this is really delicious." Amy smiled and said, "I'll look forward to trying them tomorrow. Just one more." Thomas took another. Amy didn't mind and went to take a shower. Exhausted, Amy went to bed early and quickly fell asleep. Thomas was watching TV in the living room, unconsciously eating one chocolate after another. The next morning when Amy woke up, Thomas was already awake. When she went to the kitchen, he was drinking coffee and reading something. "Good morning, birthday girl." "That ended yesterday," Amy said with a laugh. "I think I'll try those chocolates now." When she went to the living room, she found the empty chocolate box on the table. "Thomas, did you eat them all?" Thomas nodded apologetically. "Sorry, before I knew it, I'd eaten them all." They were really delicious. Amy felt a little disappointed, but it wasn't a big deal. "Well, that's okay. You can buy me more sometime." Just then, the phone rang. The screen displayed Patricia Collins. "Oh, it's your mother," Amy answered the phone. "Hello, Patricia." "Amy, good morning." Patricia's voice sounded brighter than usual. "Yesterday was your birthday. Congratulations." "Thank you." "And the chocolates arrived." "Oh, good," Patricia said happily. "How did the chocolates taste?" "I chose something special," Amy answered with a laugh. "Well, Thomas ate them all." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. Then, Amy heard Patricia's voice tremble. "Are you serious?" That tone made Amy suspicious. Patricia's reaction seemed to contain something more serious than mere surprise. "Yes, he ate them all last night. But he said they were delicious." "I see." Patricia's voice was hoarse. "That's unexpected." The conversation ended awkwardly, and right after Amy hung up, Thomas's cell phone rang. Thomas looked a bit unwell but answered the phone. A few minutes later, he returned to the living room. His face was pale, and sweat was streaming from his forehead. "Amy, I got a call from the hospital. I need to go right away, feeling sick." Before finishing his sentence, Thomas rushed to the bathroom and began vomiting violently. With a trembling voice he said, "Call an ambulance." Amy hurriedly called 911. Meanwhile, Thomas's condition rapidly deteriorated. When she touched his forehead, she felt an abnormal heat. "It's okay, Thomas. The ambulance will be here soon." As the ambulance siren began to sound, Thomas's cell phone rang again. Amy saw it displayed Mom. She didn't answer. A strange premonition was spreading in her chest. The siren sound approached, and Amy left the apartment door wide open. The paramedics quickly entered the room and checked Thomas's condition as he lay in the bathroom. "He's showing severe dehydration. He needs an IV immediately," one paramedic said. "How long has he been showing symptoms?" "He looked a bit pale when he woke up, but suddenly got much worse," Amy answered with a trembling voice. "Last night he didn't." Then she remembered the chocolates from her mother-in-law. Thomas was placed on a stretcher, and Amy rode in the ambulance. In the swaying vehicle, she held Thomas's hand tightly. Cold sweat appeared on his forehead, and his face had turned gray. "It's okay, Thomas. We'll be at the hospital soon." When the ambulance arrived at the hospital, Thomas was immediately taken to the treatment room. Amy remained in the waiting room, filling out necessary paperwork. Taking out her cell phone, she saw 5 missed calls from Patricia. Just then, the phone rang again. "Hello, Patricia." "Amy, where is Thomas? Why isn't he answering his phone?" Patricia's voice was nearly hysterical. "He's in the hospital. He suddenly became very ill." "Which hospital?" "I'm coming right now." Amy told her the hospital name and hung up. She was overcome with a strange feeling. Why was Patricia so panicked? And why did this happen after the chocolate conversation? 30 minutes later, Patricia and Vanessa arrived at the hospital. Both looked distraught, especially Patricia, whose face showed terror. Where is he? Where is my son? Patricia confronted the receptionist. Amy stood up and approached them. They're treating him. I'm waiting for the doctor to come out. When Patricia saw Amy, she flinched for a moment. What happened? Why suddenly? I don't know. He was already feeling unwell when he woke up, Amy said, and after a slight pause added, after eating your chocolates. The color drained from Patricia and Vanessa's faces at these words. They exchanged glances, and Vanessa bit her lip. Chocolates? Patricia lowered her voice. He ate, all of them. Amy observed their reactions. Yes, all of them last night. He wasn't feeling well by morning. At this moment, a doctor appeared in the waiting room. Mrs. Collins, we have the initial test results for your husband. The three gathered around the doctor. He's showing symptoms of severe food poisoning. There's a stronger reaction than usual food poisoning bacteria, so we're conducting additional tests. Did he eat anything unusual? Amy remembered the empty chocolate box. He ate expensive chocolates last night. The box is at home. The doctor frowned. Could you bring that packaging? It might be necessary for testing. I'll get it, Vanessa suddenly volunteered. Tell me your apartment address. Amy, though suspicious, gave her the address. Vanessa quickly left the hospital. Doctor, Patricia turned to the doctor. Is my son going to be all right? We're administering an antidote now, just in case, because the tests are showing some toxin reaction. Toxin? Amy's voice rose. What do you mean? The doctor chose his words carefully. We can't be certain yet. However, from the symptoms and initial test results, we believe this isn't ordinary food poisoning. Patricia collapsed into a chair. No way. 2 hours later, Vanessa returned. She wasn't carrying the chocolate box. I couldn't find it, she said. Maybe it was thrown in the trash. Amy frowned. It should have been on the living room table. At this point, a man identifying himself as a detective arrived at the hospital. Mrs. Collins? I'd like to ask you some questions. Police? Patricia's voice trembled. Why? Specific toxins were detected in Thomas Collins's body. We need to investigate the situation. Amy touched her cheek with a trembling hand. Toxins? Surely not. The detective continued taking notes and asking questions. Have you consumed any special food or drink recently? Last night, expensive chocolates arrived from my mother-in-law, and my husband ate them all, Amy answered. The detective's eyes turned to Patricia. Where did you purchase these chocolates? Patricia's face turned pale. Chateau Chocolatier. But this is a misunderstanding. Is there any packaging or remaining chocolates? Amy shook her head. My sister-in-law went to get them, but she said she couldn't find them. The detective looked at Vanessa. You really couldn't find them? Vanessa sat uneasily in her chair. No, they weren't there. After carefully observing the two, the detective said, as a precaution, we'll need to investigate the apartment. Amy nodded and handed over the keys. Then she headed to the treatment room to check on Thomas. He was lying weakly, receiving in fourth Amy, he said with dry lips. What happened? We don't know yet. But you'll get better, don't worry. Under the nurse's watch, Amy stepped into the hallway. As she was about to go to the restroom, passing by a private room, she heard a small voice. Mom, the plan is ruined. It was Vanessa's voice. Be quiet, she might hear us. Patricia's voice was low and angry. Amy stopped and pressed herself against the wall. What's going to happen to us, if the police investigate? There's no evidence. You disposed of the box, right? Yes, but be quiet. Just pretend you know nothing. Thomas will recover. The amount wasn't enough. Amy's chest felt ice cold. She moved away from the spot and returned to the waiting room on shaky legs. The horrifying truth of what Patricia and Vanessa had tried to do was becoming clear. When the detective returned to the hospital, his expression was stern. We've recovered the chocolate box from the trash can. It's been sent to the lab. Amy looked at Patricia and Vanessa. The color of fear spread across their faces. We also found a box from a location other than your apartment's trash can. Miss Vanessa Collins, from the trunk of your car. Vanessa tried to stand up from her chair, but another officer placed a hand on her shoulder. Patricia Collins and Vanessa Collins, I'm detaining you for questioning on suspicion of attempted murder. Amy stood stunned. She couldn't accept the reality that her mother-in-law and sister-in-law had tried to poison Thomas, or more likely, originally intended to poison her. Why? She asked in a faint voice. Patricia looked at Amy with cold eyes. We won't give Thomas to someone like you. That boy is our family. The hospital corridor was cold, and Amy sat in a plastic chair, clutching a coffee cup with trembling hands. Several hours had passed since Patricia and Vanessa were taken away by the police. Thomas was sleeping in the intensive care unit, and the doctors had informed her that his condition was stable. The dangerous period seemed to have passed, Amy closed her tired eyes and recalled past events. Since her marriage, she had experienced numerous unexplained illnesses. She often felt headaches or nausea, especially after visiting her mother-in-law's house. At the time, she thought it was just stress, but now a different possibility emerged. Her cell phone rang, displaying Jessica on the screen. "Amy, are you okay? I saw on the news that your husband was rushed to the hospital because of poisoning." Amy explained the situation to Jessica. Jessica worked at a law firm and was a friend who could calmly respond to such situations. "What are the police saying?" Jessica asked. "They're questioning Patricia and Vanessa on suspicion of attempted murder. Apparently, traces of arsenic were detected in the chocolates." A sharp intake of breath could be heard from Jessica on the other end of the line. "Amy, this is really serious. I'm coming over right now. Until then, don't talk to anyone." An hour later, Jessica arrived at the hospital. She began analyzing Amy's situation with professional eyes. "Think back to past events," Jessica said quietly. "Has Patricia ever offered you food or drink, especially just to you?" Amy thought hard. "Now that you mention it, at the party after our wedding, she brought special wine and poured it only in my glass. Afterward, I became terribly ill and couldn't even participate in the wedding photo session. And then at Christmas, she gave me special cookies, just for me. After eating them, I was bedridden for 3 days, but I thought it was food poisoning." Jessica was recording in her notebook. "Anything else? Any potential evidence?" "I don't know, but 2 weeks before Thomas was hospitalized, his work insurance changed. He said he had enrolled in a better life insurance policy." Jessica's face tightened. "Who are the beneficiaries?" "Me and Thomas's mother, I think. He said if anything happens, both of you will be secure." Jessica stood up. "Amy, this is clearly premeditated. You need to tell the police everything." That night, Amy told the detective all her suspicions. The detective nodded as he listened and promised, "We'll investigate." A week later, Thomas was allowed to be discharged. He had lost weight and still looked unwell, but thanks to strong medication, he had somehow recovered. Amy took him home and quietly nursed him. "Why would Mom do such a thing?" Thomas had mumbled repeatedly. He seemed unable to accept the truth. Patricia and Vanessa had been temporarily released on bail. They had tried to contact Thomas, but Amy had blocked all calls. Thomas's recovery was her top priority. 3 days after discharge, Amy made a decision. She needed to tell her husband the truth. When Thomas was lying on the sofa, she sat next to him. "Thomas, we need to go to your mother's house." He looked at her with surprised eyes. "Why?" "To find evidence. You know this wasn't the first time, don't you?" Thomas silently looked away. "I don't know that Mom would really do such a thing. Trust me." Amy took her husband's hand. "For our future, we need to know the truth." The next day, though Thomas was still weak, he agreed to go to Patricia's house with Amy. They chose a time when Patricia and Vanessa would be at the lawyer's office preparing for the trial. Thomas had a spare key. "What should we look for?" Thomas asked while standing at the entrance. "Anything unusual? Especially check your mother's bedroom and desk." They quietly entered the house. Patricia's house, which they hadn't visited in a while, was as orderly as always. Amy went up the stairs from the living room to Patricia's bedroom. Thomas followed her, though hesitantly. "It feels like we're invading Mom's privacy." "Thomas, your mother tried to kill me." Amy's voice was cold. Patricia's bedroom was elegantly decorated, with family photos arranged on the bedside table. Amy opened the closet and began searching the upper shelves. She found nothing. "Let's check the desk." Patricia's desk was locked, but Thomas managed to pry open the drawers. Inside, various documents were neatly arranged. Amy quickly checked the documents and stopped at one file. It was a copy of Thomas's new life insurance contract. The beneficiaries were indeed Amy and Patricia, but there was a small mark next to Amy's name. A separate note read to be changed. Searching deeper, they found another shocking document. It was Amy's own life insurance policy. Amy had no memory of when Thomas had contracted this insurance, and the beneficiaries were Patricia and Vanessa. "This is my life insurance. When did you contract this?" Thomas looked at the document with a pale face. "I don't know. Mom said she would arrange everything." Amy covered her face with trembling hands. They had been planning from the beginning. From under the dresser, Amy found a small box. Inside were photos of her with needles stuck in them. Furthermore, various herbs and powders were stored in small bottles with labels. "Thomas, look at this." Amy opened the laptop in the corner of the desk. It was password protected, but Thomas tried his mother's commonly used password, and the screen opened. The browser history included searches for undetectable poisons, slow poisoning methods, and complete guide to life insurance fraud. Thomas sat down in a chair and held his head. "I can't believe it. Why would Mom?" Suddenly, they heard the door open. They turned around in surprise. "What are you doing?" Vanessa was standing at the bedroom door. Seeing them, her face changed color. You have no right to enter. Amy answered calmly. We're keeping all of this as evidence. Evidence that you and your mother tried to kill me. Don't be ridiculous. Vanessa couldn't hide her wariness. There's no evidence. Thomas slowly stood up. Vanessa, why? Why would you and Mom? Vanessa's expression changed. Why? Because everything changed after you married this woman. Our plans, our future. What do you mean? Vanessa laughed. Her laughter mixed sadness and hatred. Mom never intended to accept you as family from the beginning. Her target was Thomas's property and your insurance money. Amy picked up the documents and showed them to Thomas. Look. Your mother has taken out large loans in your name. They were in financial trouble. Thomas was speechless. Then, with a voice mixing anger and sadness, he said, Get out, Vanessa. I never want to see you again. Thomas, you have to choose your family. This woman or us? People who tried to kill my wife, our family? Thomas's voice was trembling. Get out before I call the police. Amy stood beside Thomas and held his hand. They silently stared at Vanessa. This isn't over, Vanessa said threateningly as she left the room. At that moment, Thomas's cell phone rang. He answered the call and after talking for a few minutes, looked at Amy with a changed expression. Mom has confessed everything. Autumn sunlight poured down on the marble steps of the courthouse. Amy and Thomas held hands as they left the building. The final verdict had been pronounced, ending the long and painful trial process. Patricia Collins received a 5-year prison sentence for assault and conspiracy. The crime of deliberately preparing poison and repeatedly endangering Amy was severe. Vanessa, on the other hand, admitted her guilt as an accomplice and received a 3-year suspended sentence. Her lawyer's argument that she had acted under her mother's influence was accepted. It's over, Amy said, exhaling deeply. Thomas pulled her shoulder close. Yes, we can finally move forward. Getting into the car, Thomas began driving toward the suburbs. They had decided to establish a new home in a small town in Connecticut away from Boston. It was a fitting place for a new beginning. When they visited Patricia on visiting day, she had completely changed. Her former dignity was gone, and she was isolated from other inmates, mentally cornered. She momentarily brightened at seeing Thomas, but his cold gaze made her fall silent again. She uttered words of apology to Amy, but her eyes showed no genuine regret. A letter of apology arrived from Vanessa. It said, I want to look at my own life, free from mother's control. Amy read the letter but didn't write back. Forgiveness would take time. Perhaps she would never be able to forgive. Upon arriving at their new house, they carried in their belongings. The small but bright house symbolized their new life. What do we do now? Thomas asked, sitting down in the living room. Amy smiled and sat beside him. First, I want to think about the interior design of this house. Then, get my web design company on track. I need to find a new workplace too, Thomas said. He had quit his financial company in Boston and applied to a small local company. The salary would be lower, but he was seeking a less stressful environment. That night, Amy shared surprising news with Thomas. We're going to be a family of 3. Thomas's eyes shone with joy. Really? When? In 6 months. I confirmed it with a test. He embraced his wife, contemplating that small life. Their future life would not be easy. However, they had overcome difficulties to get this far. Life with their new family was sure to be filled with a different kind of happiness. Lying in bed, Amy held Thomas's hand. I'm so glad I met you. Not eating those chocolates was the most fortunate decision of my life. Thomas laughed quietly and kissed his wife's forehead. Thanks to me eating them all, we discovered the truth. In the gentle moonlight illuminating the room, the two contemplated the future they would walk with their new life. It was the beginning of quiet happiness at the end of hardship.